If you have a pension coming, you are in rare company. Most Americans are heading into retirement with two things: a 401k they hope they saved enough into, and Social Security they hope won't get cut. That's it. That's the whole plan for about 85% of the workforce. You have a third leg, a guaranteed monthly check that shows up regardless of what the market does. A floor that most people would trade almost anything to have. So why are you watching videos like this one? Because somewhere in the back of your mind, you already know that having more moving parts means more ways for things to go wrong. And the retirement advice flooding YouTube right now, most of it was built for that other 85%. It assumes your only job is to grow a pile of money and then slowly spend it down. It doesn't account for what happens when you add a pension to the mix. I've watched people walk into retirement with everything lined up: the pension, the 401k, decades of Social Security contributions, and still get blindsided. Not because they didn't save enough. Because nobody told them that combining all three sources of income creates problems that none of them would create on their own. The pension doesn't make retirement simpler. It makes it different, and different requires a different playbook. There are two specific traps buried inside this setup. One is hiding in a 30-page HR packet that's about to land on your desk. The other one is hiding inside your own tax return, quietly building for years before it detonates. You're sitting on the strongest financial foundation most people will never have. But that foundation has two fault lines, and they can quietly erase hundreds of thousands of dollars if you don't know where to look. If you're somewhere between 50 and 65 and you want to protect what you've spent a career building, subscribe to We's Investor. And let's start with the first trap, the truth about that paperwork HR is about to hand you. Picture this. You're about 5 years out from retirement. Things are finally starting to feel real. And then one afternoon, someone from HR stops by your desk and slides over a folder, maybe 30 pages, lots of legal language in small print. And somewhere near the front, two numbers that are supposed to represent the same thing. Option A, all $500,000. Deposited into your account. Done. Option B, $3,500 a month. Every month. For the rest of your life. They give you 30 days to decide. Most people stare at that $500,000 and feel something. It looks like a reward, like the company finally acknowledging what 25 years of showing up actually meant. And that feeling is exactly what the math is designed to produce. Because that offer wasn't built for you. It was built by actuaries whose job is to calculate what your life expectancy is worth, and then price the lump sum just low enough that it saves the company money. They're not doing you a favor. They're transferring risk. Longevity risk, market risk, all of it from their balance sheet onto yours. I've been close to situations like this, and what strikes me every time is how few people ever ask what discount rate the company used to generate that number. That rate, buried in the fine print toward the back of the packet, is doing most of the heavy lifting. When interest rates are high, companies can justify a lower lump sum. When rates drop, the math shifts. But by the time most people figure that out, the 30 days are already gone. So let's run it. $500,000 today versus $3,500 a month for life. If you live 12 years past retirement, the monthly payout totals $504,000. You've already broken even. Every month after year 12 is pure gain that the lump sum can never recover. If you make it to 85, the monthly track pays out over $840,000. The lump sum is still sitting at $500,000, minus whatever the market did to it along the way. Now, the lump sum isn't automatically wrong. If you have serious health concerns, if your family history is short, if you have discipline to invest it and leave it alone, it might be the right call. And it does give you something the monthly check never will, an asset you can leave behind. That's the real trade-off. Monthly income buys you security and longevity protection. The lump sum buys you control and the ability to pass something on. You're not choosing between good and bad. You're choosing what kind of risk you'd rather hold. The company already made their choice when they built that offer. What most people skip is this. Before you sign anything, ask AHR for the specific discount rate they used. Then look at your family health history. If your parents and grandparents lived into their late 80s, the monthly payout math usually wins by a wide margin. If your history is different, the calculus shifts. The point isn't to scare you away from the lump sum. The point is that this decision deserves more than 30 days and a folder full of legal boilerplate. Take the time, run your own numbers, and know that the structure of that offer was designed with the company's interests in mind first. Once you understand that, you can make a decision that's actually built around yours. Here's something nobody really tells you when you land a pension. For the first few years of retirement, everything feels right. The check shows up. The amount is exactly what you expected. You're not touching the 401k, not watching the market every morning. There's a real exhale that happens. After decades of saving and planning, you finally get to just live. I used to think that was the finish line, that a guaranteed income stream meant the hard part was over. I was wrong about that. The stability is real, but it comes with a cost most people don't see until it's too late to do much about it. The problem is simple. Your pension is a fixed number. Your expenses are not. Most pension plans don't include a cost of living adjustment, and the ones that do typically cap it around 2%. That sounds reasonable until you look at what healthcare actually costs as you get older. Medical inflation has consistently run above that cap for years. Prescriptions, specialist visits, procedures that weren't on your radar at 62 become a real line item by 75. The Social Security Administration confirmed a KOHLA of 2.8% for 2026. That's better than some years. But it's still a ceiling, and your actual spending doesn't care about ceilings. Run the math on a $50,000 annual pension with no KOHLA. After 20 years, that same check, same dollar amount, buys roughly half of what it bought on day one. The number on the deposit doesn't change. But what it can pay for quietly shrinks every single year without anyone sending you a notice. The early years of retirement are often the healthiest and most active. You're traveling, you're spending, the income feels more than enough. That's the part people plan for. What's harder to plan for is the stretch from 80 onward, when healthcare costs climb, when you might need help at home, when the fixed check that felt generous at 65 starts to feel tight. This isn't a reason to panic about having a pension. It's a reason to be clear-eyed about what the pension actually covers and what it doesn't. A fixed income floor is a powerful thing, but a floor isn't a full plan. The question worth asking now, while you still have 5 years of runway, is what else in your financial picture can grow? Because the pension won't. Most people in this situation assume their 401k is just a backup emergency fund, a cushion they'll barely touch. That's a reasonable instinct. But it leaves the one asset that could actually fight inflation sitting on the sideline. Your 401k can do something your pension never will. It can compound. It can grow faster than inflation. And if invested with a long enough horizon, it can quietly offset the purchasing power your fixed income loses each year. That's the reframe. You don't have a pension and a retirement account. You have a stable floor and an inflation engine. The question is whether you're using the engine. And here's where it gets complicated. Because that same 401k you've been carefully building for decades, combined with your pension and Social Security, can quietly trigger one of the IRS's most punishing and least talked about penalties. Let me tell you about someone I've watched go through this. Retired at 64. Pension coming in, Social Security starting up. A 401k they'd been adding to for 30 years. By every measure, they did everything right. saved consistently, never touched the retirement accounts early, lived within their means. At 73, they got a letter from Medicare. Not a bill they were expecting, a surcharge. An additional charge tacked onto their Part B premium because their income, as the IRS calculated it, had crossed a threshold they didn't know existed. They hadn't gotten a raise. They hadn't sold anything. What happened was simpler and more frustrating than that. The IRS required them to start withdrawing from their 401k. And that withdrawal, stacked on top of the pension and Social Security, pushed their total income past the line. They did nothing wrong. That's what made it so hard to absorb. This is what the IRS calls required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Starting at age 73, the government requires you to pull a certain amount out of pre-tax retirement accounts every year, whether you need the money or not. The formula is based on your account balance and your life expectancy. The bigger the account, the bigger the forced withdrawal. For most people, that's a manageable inconvenience. For someone with a pension, it can be a serious problem. Here's why. Your pension already creates an income floor. Add Social Security on top of that, and you're already at a solid number before you touch the 401k at all. Then the RMD kicks in and forces additional taxable income into the picture. Suddenly, your modified adjusted gross income, your MAJ, is climbing past thresholds you never anticipated because you never needed that money in the first place. In 2026, the standard Medicare Part B premium is $202.90 per month. That's the baseline. But once your MAJ crosses $109,000 as a single filer or $218,000 as a married couple, IRMAA kicks in. Income-related monthly adjustment amount. It's a surcharge layered on top of your regular premium, and it can run anywhere from a few hundred to several $1,000s extra per year per person. The cruel part is the 2-year look-back. Medicare uses your tax return from 2 years prior to set your premium, so the RMD that pushed you over the line in 2024 shows up as a higher Medicare bill in 2026. By the time you see the impact, the decision that caused it is already in the past. I've watched family members go through this. The ones who were hurt worst weren't the ones who overspent or made risky investments. They were the careful ones. The people who maxed their contributions every year, who were proud of the balance they'd built, who thought a bigger 401k meant more security. Nobody told them that a large pre-tax account, combined with a pension income floor, could eventually turn their own savings into a tax liability. That's the trap. You spent decades doing exactly what the system told you to do, and the system penalizes you for it on the other end. The math is almost insulting. A couple with a $60,000 pension, $40,000 in combined Social Security, and a 401k large enough to trigger a $30,000 RMD is suddenly looking at $130,000 in gross income. Well past the IRMAA threshold. Their Medicare costs go up, their effective tax rate goes up, and the 401k they saved so carefully is now generating a tax bill every year whether they spend the money or not. The better saver you were, the harder this hits. The good news, and there is good news, is that this is one of the most solvable problems in retirement planning if you catch it early enough. 5 years of runway is enough to make a real difference. But first, you need to understand what happens when the math gets even harder. When one spouse passes, the entire equation shifts in the cruelest possible way. Most retirement planning stops at the couple. You run the numbers together, you plan the income together, you stress test the budget together. And when everything adds up, there's a real sense of relief. The pension covers the basics. Social Security fills in the gap. The 401k sits in reserve. It works. What most plans don't model clearly enough is the day it stops being a two-person household. When one spouse passes, the surviving partner doesn't just lose a companion. They lose an income stream. The smaller of the two Social Security checks disappears. Gone. The household goes from two sources of guaranteed income down to one, almost overnight. That alone is painful. But what compounds it is the tax filing status change that nobody warns you about in advance. As a married couple filing jointly in 2026, your standard deduction is $32,200. The moment one spouse dies, that number gets cut in half. The surviving spouse files as single. The deduction drops. The tax brackets compress. The same income that was taxed at one rate inside a joint return is now taxed harder inside a single return. And IRMAA follows the same logic. The threshold that protected you as a couple, $218,000 in MAJ, drops immediately to $109,000 for a single filer. The pension didn't shrink. The RMDs didn't stop. But suddenly the surviving spouse is sitting on the same income, inside half the tax shelter, with Medicare surcharges kicking in at half the previous threshold. I've seen this catch people completely off guard, not because they were careless, because the financial plan they built was technically correct for two people and structurally fragile for one. The surviving spouse is often already dealing with the hardest stretch of their life. The grief, the paperwork, the decisions that can't wait. And layered on top of all of that is a tax bill that went up, a Medicare premium that went up, and a monthly income that went down. Fixed costs don't adjust for loss. Property tax stays the same. Homeowners insurance stays the same. Utilities, maintenance, the car payment, none of it recalculates because the household shrank by one. This is the fragility path. Two good incomes, a solid plan, and then one event quietly unravels the math underneath it. The resilience path looks different. It's built by people who saw this coming early enough to do something about it. They spent a few years before retirement converting pre-tax dollars into Roth accounts at lower tax rates. They structured their income so the surviving spouse wouldn't be pushed over the IRMAA line by RMDs alone. They thought about the plan not just as a couple, but as two individuals who might eventually be navigating this alone. The difference between the two paths usually isn't income. It isn't even how much they saved. It's timing. The families who land in a resilient position almost always started making adjustments 4 to 6 years before retirement, while the tax levers were still available to pull. You still have that window. The picture I've been painting here is complicated, and I won't pretend otherwise. But complicated doesn't mean hopeless. It means you need a different set of moves than the standard retirement playbook hands you. And those moves are more straightforward than they sound. So what do you actually do with all of this? Because knowing the traps is one thing. Having a plan to work around them is something else entirely. I'll be honest with you. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what the market does next year, or whether Congress rewrites the tax code before you retire. But the math on taxes doesn't lie, and the window you have right now, roughly 5 years out, is one of the most valuable stretches of time in your entire financial life. Not because of what you can earn, because of what you can restructure. Here are 3 moves that actually matter. Move 1. Rethink what your portfolio is for. Most people treat their 401k as a savings account with better returns. But once you have a pension, that framing is off. Your pension is already doing the job of bonds. It's stable, it's guaranteed, it shows up every month regardless of market conditions. That's exactly what the fixed income portion of a traditional portfolio is supposed to do, which means your 401k doesn't need to be conservative. It doesn't need to hedge against volatility the way it would if you had no guaranteed income underneath it. You can afford to let it run, not recklessly, but with more equity exposure than the standard age-based formula would suggest. Because the pension is your floor, the 401k can be your inflation engine. That's the shift. One protects you, the other grows for you. They're doing different jobs. Most people with pensions never make this distinction. They manage the 401k as if the pension doesn't exist, and end up with a portfolio that's too conservative to outpace the inflation that's quietly eating their fixed income. Move 2. Get the actual number behind the lump sum offer. When HR hands you that folder, don't just look at the two options. Ask for the discount rate they use to calculate the lump sum. That number is almost never on the front page. The discount rate tells you the assumptions baked into that offer. A higher rate means the company is presenting a lower lump sum than your lifetime payout would actually justify. Once you have that number, you can compare it against your own family health history. If your parents and grandparents consistently lived into their late 80s, the monthly payout almost always wins the long game. If your health picture is different, the calculus shifts. But you can't make that call without the rate. Ask for it directly. HR is required to provide it. Move 3. Start Roth conversions now before the RMDs force your hand. This is the move with the longest runway and the highest payoff, and it's the one most people wait too long to start. Here's the core idea. Right now, between today and the day you retire, your taxable income is probably at its peak. But the moment you stop working, there's often a gap, a few years before Social Security starts, before RMDs kick in, where your income drops and your tax bracket drops with it. That window is one of the most valuable opportunities in retirement planning. Use it to convert portions of your pre-tax 401k into a Roth IRA. You pay taxes on the conversion now at a lower rate. Everything that goes into the Roth grows tax-free and comes out tax-free. No RMDs, no IRMAA exposure from those dollars, no tax bill on the growth. The target in 2026. Keep your annual Roth conversion amount calibrated so your total MA stays below $218,000 for a married couple or $109,000 as a single filer. Stay under those thresholds and you avoid the IRMAA surcharge entirely. Cross them and you're paying more for Medicare on top of the conversion tax. The math on this is deliberate. You're choosing to pay a smaller tax bill today to permanently eliminate a larger one later. The 401k you convert stops being an RMD liability. It stops being an IRMAA trigger. And for the surviving spouse, it stops being the thing that pushes them into a punishing tax bracket after everything else has already gotten harder. That's the trade-off worth making. A known cost today for a structurally cleaner picture on the other side. None of these moves require a finance degree. They require a clear view of your numbers and enough lead time to execute. 5 years is enough. But 5 years goes faster than it sounds. If you want a roadmap built around your specific situation, drop your question in the comments below. Every retirement picture is different, and the details matter more than the general rules. Let's come back to where we started. 85% of Americans are heading into retirement with 2 things and hoping it's enough. You have 3. A guaranteed monthly check that doesn't care what the S&P 500 did last quarter, a Social Security benefit you've spent decades earning, and a retirement account that, with the right moves, can work harder than you've been asking it to. That's not a problem. That's a position most people would trade years of their career to be in. The complexity isn't a sign that something went wrong. It's a sign that you have more pieces on the board than the standard playbook was written for. The traps we talked about, the lump sum discount, the inflation erosion, the IRMAA surcharge, the widow's tax cliff, none of them are inevitable. They're predictable. And predictable problems have solutions as long as you find them early enough. You found this early enough. The families I've watched navigate this well aren't the ones with the biggest accounts or the highest incomes. They're the ones who understood their specific picture clearly and made a handful of deliberate moves before the deadlines closed. That's it. No exotic strategies. No market timing. Just a clear view of the mechanics and enough lead time to act. That's exactly where you're sitting right now. So don't let the details overwhelm you into doing nothing. Pick the move that applies most directly to your situation. the lump sum question, the Roth conversion window, the portfolio reframe, and start there. One step taken now is worth more than a perfect plan that never gets off the ground. You've spent a career building this. Make sure the back half of the plan is as solid as the front half was. If this gave you something useful, subscribe to Wes Investor. This is the kind of planning that doesn't make headlines but makes a real difference when it counts. I'll see you in the next one.